Hey guys, this is Ray, owner of Double R Diesel. Welcome back to my shop and my channel, and I'm doing another question and answer video for this week based upon your comments and your questions that you have asked and sent in. And guys, I really appreciate these comments and these questions. It makes for really good discussion, and I really enjoy doing this every week. I like to tell the truth and, keep you guys informed on, what I think is reality, and try not to give, false hope and biased opinions as much as possible. Moving right along into the video, I got an email from Mr. James here, and he asked some questions about his Ram 2024 model truck with a standard output Cummins. And he asked a lot of good questions, and he started off right here. The first question he asked concerning his 24 truck is the 68 RFE really as bad as everyone on the internet makes it out to be? Well, the answer to that question is no, they're not a bad transmission at all. I mean, they do have some you would say, they do have some Achilles heels. They could potentially have issues, but the 68 RFE, if you treat it well and you don't abuse it, it is a very good transmission and is very reliable, and it performs very well. The only bad thing I can say about it is it's only a 6-speed transmission, and the newer ones are 8 and 10 speeds. So that's really the only drawback to it. But the 68 RFE is a good transmission. You can make it better than stock. Obviously, we can tune it, and when we tune it, we can tune it to add a little, as much line pressure as possible. With a stop valve body, we can alter the shift points and the lockup strategy a little bit, which takes the load off and strain off the transmission, which helps it to last longer. And also you can modify it with parts. So, if I had a bone stock 60 RFE pickup and I wanted to do something to it to help it last longer, I would put an aftermarket valve body in it and tune it for higher line pressure. That higher line pressure is clutch holding power, and particularly for the overdrives. The overdrive is probably the weakest link in a 68 RFE. Those clutches, have a tendency, if you abuse it, to slip and fail quicker than anything else. So, get the line pressure turned up as much as possible within the mechanical limits. So, if it's a stop valve body, we can bump the line pressure up maybe 5-10 psi, which is, helps a little bit. We can play with the line pressure gain settings in the tune, which helps a little bit. But the real big help comes when you change to an aftermarket valve body, and we can really increase the line pressure, say from stop 165 to 225, even up to 250 in some cases. That helps a good bit as far as holding those clutches tight and not allowing them to slip. I will say this, that the clutch material that is used in a 68 RFE it was explained to me by RevMax. It is a very good material and it holds very well, but once it slips once or twice and it glazes the clutch steel surfaces, it just simply won't have enough friction and holding power to hold much any at all anymore. So that's what happens. So if you slip those clutches, and quite oftentimes, it just never holds as good as it ever would beforehand. So you got to take care of those overdrive clutches in particular, and changing out that valve body helps a whole lot, along with good tuning. Mr. James went right along and asked another question. It says, assuming you did a valve body swap, can the transmission... He says, assuming you did a valve body swap, can the transmission be tuned? You mentioned that the trans and engine tuning go together. And what he's talking about is, can you tune them separately? And anything Ram 2010 and newer, you can't tune the transmission separate from the engine as far as the 68 RFE is concerned. They're all on the same calibration file. So if you retune the transmission, you're retuning the engine. But it's well worth doing. He also asked us, replacing the valve body without trans tuning make it shift better. My truck is a very lazy roll in the 4th and 5th gear that drives me nuts. Well, you can get, you can say, for example, you can buy a RevMax Performance valve body. And when you buy one of those valve bodies, you can set it up so that it will work with tuning or without tuning. I will say that they work better with tuning because you have a full control of how the line pressure is ramped in, along with the shift points and lockup strategy to improve the transmission's performance and reliability overall. Is where if you don't tune it, what you do with those, how you set that valve body up is RevMax includes a screw that you screw in the bottom of the valve body that basically plugs up a relief port, and it just holds constant full line pressure all the time. And you know that will hold the clutches tighter and prevent them from slipping. But in my mind, it's not as good as tuning it because I think you're working the pump on the transmission harder. You're never giving it a chance to really rest, so to speak, and you can heat up the fluid quicker. And you don't get the modified shift points and lockup strategy that you would be if you tuned it. So tuning for a valve body is better than setting up the valve body tuneless and not tuning it at all, in my opinion. He asked some questions about the engine. He said, what's involved with emissions compliant tuning on my 24 standard output? I saw on your website that it would require an ECM swap, and that seems really costly. Is there just the code? Is it just the code that hasn't been cracked on these 24s yet? And will it always require an older ECM? So here's the deal. The new ECMs from 2022 on up, and it's not just the Cummins ECMs, it's a lot of car manufacturer ECMs that's been produced in the last 2 or 3 years. They have upped the security on the ECM so that they can't be tampered with aftermarket calibration. So basically what that means is if you program a tune into these newer ECMs, that tune has to have certain markers inside that tune that identify it as being an actual factory produced tune. And when you change a tune-up with an aftermarket software like I use, you're changing things away from factory calibrations, and you can never set those markers up that the newer ECMs are looking for. So basically, with the 22 and newer ECMs, you can program. I can program a bone stock tune in with an MM3 into one of those ECMs, and it'll take it just fine. But if I were to try to program a modified tune in any form or fashion, right down to the tiniest byte of information, it would put the ECM into a security lockdown mode and basically would brick it, so to speak. You can recover it if that happens by programming in a completely stock tune again, but you can't program a modified tune. Now, that brings me into the discussion. So there are some companies out there that offer tuning for 22 and up Ram Cummins trucks without swapping the ECM. Now let me explain to you how that works. About all of these advertisements for tunes that don't require swapping out the ECM, they're all for deleted trucks, okay? And what they're using is a factory approved setup calibration file that was intended for a truck that would operate in a country that doesn't have emissions. That's all it is. I mean, for example, it would be basically like a Mexican truck file calibration, you might would say. So in reality, all they're doing is using a factory built tune from Cummins and Ram that was intended for a truck that would be in a country that didn't have emissions. Therefore, you can program that tune into one of these ECMs, the truck will run deleted and you won't have any problems. But everything in that tune now, guys, has to be stock. Power wise, transmission wise, you can't change a tidbit of information. Now there's some guys out there that's claimed that they're offering increased power with these tunes that you don't have to swap the ECM, but they're using a backdoor method to change settings within the calibration that are only temporary rights. You might say it's, you know, they're right to the RAM versus the ROM, but it doesn't always work, and you can end up actually stranding yourself side the road with one of these setups. So if you're going to tune, my recommendation, if you're going to tune anything 22 and newer, you need to swap the ECM to one out of a 19 through 21 model. If you're going to do emissions compliant tuning, you have no choice, because there's not an emissions compliant file out there that's factory approved that offers increased power and change in different transmission tuning. It doesn't exist. So when I do emissions compliant tunes for 22 and up trucks, it is modified. It is a modified stock tune that no longer would meet the requirements of what the 22 through 24 ECM is looking for. So you got to change the ECM. That's just my opinion. I think you don't even consider doing a tune that doesn't require changing the ECM, because it's going to bite you sooner or later, in my opinion. Do I think the 22 through 24, or who knows what the 25 ECMs, I don't even know. Nobody's cracked into one of them yet, or even tried to delete one of those trucks yet. But do I think that we would ever be able to crack that code and tune them without swapping it and have no restrictions? Honestly, I don't think so. What I know about the new security measures and the new ECMs when it comes to Cummins, when it comes to other manufacturers, I tune a lot of Fords, just for example, and a lot of Fords, a lot of my customers want to tune like 24 and newer Mustangs, 24 and newer F-150s, and they can't be tuned right now with an aftermarket calibration. And the reason why is they've all adopted this new security protocol that requires tunes and all the different modules on the car. Say, for example, the ECM has got to agree with the BCM and the ABS module and yada, yada, yada. So it's well, outside of having a Ford or Cummins or Chrysler or GM approved tune, none of the computers in the newer vehicle are going to ever agree in the thing. I mean, that's the only way it's going to function. So without Cummins and Chrysler giving a okay or unlocking the tune so the aftermarket can tune it, it's tuning the 22 and newer ECMs without doing some sort of swap. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I'll just be honest with you. I honestly don't think that's ever going to happen, guys. So, what else we got here? Oh yeah, Mr. James asked one more question about the 19 plus trucks, and that's dealing with the hydraulic roller lifters. Is it a real problem? Yes, it is a real problem. And is it going to happen to every 19 and newer truck that's out there? No. Matter of fact, there's a lot of 19 and newer trucks that have, 200,000 or 300,000 miles on them, and they're still running on the factory cam and lifters. But there's also a lot of 19 and newer trucks that have less than 100,000 miles that have had to have the camshaft and lifters replaced. I don't know all the details, but I think there's some metal issues that cause uneven wear and cause the camshaft and the lifters to fail. I think there's some actual problems with the lifters that can cause them to fail. Probably the biggest contributing factor to the camshaft and lifters failing in these new trucks is the oil. So I think what happens in many cases is a lot of guys don't realize that the 19 and newer trucks with the hydraulic roller lifter setup in them require a different viscosity of oil than the older trucks. So the older trucks, you could run a viscosity of, most people run 15W40 in them, which works great with the flat tapping solid lifters. And a lot of guys like myself run Rotella You can run Valvoline, you can run Amsoil, whatever you like. But, you know, if most guys run 15W40 in their diesels, and they've been running it for years. But the newer ones require a much lighter weight oil, 5W30, 5W40, and 10W30 I think is approved too. A lot of guys don't realize that that's what you're supposed to run in these newer trucks with the hydraulic roller lifters. And a lot of guys are still running the same old 15W40 that they've been running years and years and years. And the higher weight, the heavier oil, there's a lubrication issue and a hydraulic issue with the roller lifter. So the roller lifters require oil inside of them and pressurized oil inside of them to hold the valve lash tight. And when you go to a thicker oil, you make it more difficult for the oil to get down in those passages to pressurize that lifter as well. It allows more deposits to build up and potentially clog those ports that feed those lifters. So the lifters don't get enough oil to pressurize them, and they lose the ability to hold lash properly. And then once they lose the ability to hold lash properly, then they start kind of just bouncing around a little bit. Once they start bouncing around, eventually they can cause the roller on the bottom of the lifter to fail. And when that happens, it just gouges out the camshaft, and the whole thing is shot. So yeah, it's a problem. But if you get your truck from day one new, run the proper oil in it. I ran Rotella T6 5W40 in the trucks that I had, and that's a good recommended oil. And if you stick to something like that, you greatly reduce the chance of having problems with your hydraulic roller lifters. But yes, it is a problem, and Ram decided to put, what I understand, the same hydraulic lifters in the 25 redesign engine. The only reason I can figure that they think this is the better way to go is to reduce valve train noise, because it is a quieter setup when it works as it should, and it is a supposedly zero maintenance setup. So, you know, the older setup with the solid flat tappets, you know, every so many thousands of miles, you know, 100,000 miles, you need to adjust the valve lash, because things wear down and the lash gets a little excessive, and you get you get more valve train noise, and then, if it's really excessive, you can cause misfire and performance issues. So by going to a hydraulic roller setup, you take away having to do a valve lash adjustment. So that's one reason why they possibly do that. Okay, let's talk about YouTube video comments. So one of the biggies that I wanted to talk about this week, and probably one that will concern you guys the most, and this is probably the most important segment of this video, is, if you remember in last week's video, I told you that the EPA had responded to me to the question I had asked about retuning customers' trucks, particularly retuning for transmission changes with the 68 RFE. And if you remember in last week's video, or you want to go back and watch it and you hadn't seen it, basically the lawyer for the EPA, who was one of my prosecutors in my case when I had my civil case with them, told that prosecutor, that lawyer, attorney, told me that he couldn't give me any legal counsel, any legal advice concerning that, and told me to consult a private attorney. So I did. And what I did was contact an attorney who handles cases for diesel shops like mine, and those cases with the EPA. So I contacted an attorney. I'm not going to call his name because I want everybody beating his door down and say, I'm talking about him. But he handles cases between diesel shops and the EPA, and he's dealt with cases like mine and many others. And so he knows what the EPA's after and what they could potentially do, and what, the whole gamut of things. And guys, I got some really good news. So basically, the attorney told me, said the EPA is not concerned about what guys like myself would be doing when it comes to retuning the calibration for transmission change. And he said, the EPA fully doesn't understand how things work and how these calibrations and how engine files are tied with calibration files and so on and so forth. But basically, he said the EPA is not concerned about what we do with the transmission. And I asked him, I said, does it matter about, any prior modifications that have been done to the truck? Can I retune those? And he basically said, as long as I'm only retuning the transmission part of that calibration, I don't have to really worry about anything at all. And I can go and continue to do that. So up until this point, guys, if you were a prior customer of mine and you wanted your tune changed up from what's been done before, because you have changed your valve body, or you changed your torque converter, or you've put a completely built transmission in your truck that requires new tuning, up until this point, I haven't been retuning those trucks. I've been telling you guys I can't do it because I simply wanted to abide by what I thought the EPA had set forth and keep myself out of trouble. Well, from this point on, I'm telling you guys, if you are a prior customer of mine, and you have changed something on the transmission part of your truck that requires a retune, a new tune for whatever you've done with your transmission, I'll do it, regardless of what's been done to your truck in the past. And I've got those options up on the website now. If you go to you'll go to my website and you'll find a page where I have all the retuning options for existing customers. I got them broken down for each year model segment. If you need a new tune for your transmission, by all means, hit me up, purchase a retune off my website, and I'll take care of you guys. I feel confident that I can do that and not put myself in any kind of bind legally based upon what this attorney's told me, and I'm so thankful and I'm glad to be able to tell you guys that. So please, if you need a retune for your transmission, get a retune. By all means, please do. And I greatly would appreciate your business and support. My family would be so grateful because it will help so much financially for me. Some other things I wanted to talk about that other people have mentioned. Give me just a second to look at my phone here to pull up some of these comments. Oh, one guy asked me, would I be interested in doing some sort of Patreon or pay-per-view channel in which I taught guys how to tune their trucks? And I'm actually considering that. So, if I can't legally do certain things behind this computer myself, I could teach you guys how to do it, within reason. So, I might be doing some sort of video series in the future in which I teach guys how to use the Smarty software with UDC Pro tuning software, how to tune your truck. Now, granted, if I do something like that, I can't tell you verbatim, say somebody's going to say, well, will you show me how to delete my truck? No, I can't teach you verbatim on how to delete a truck. But I could teach you how to use a software and you could figure things out to do what you needed to do from that point on. But I think it would be good, and I wouldn't mind doing it. And, I would have to keep things in legal bounds, like I just mentioned before. But I think it would be, I think I'll definitely be interested in doing some sort of video series in which you guys could purchase a instructional video on how to use the Smarty software and the MM3 tuner to tune your truck based upon your needs. What else? Let's see. Somebody mentioned about the effect of diesel exhaust fluid on bees, and I've never heard anything about that. So I went to Google and see if I could find some information about, diesel exhaust fluid and the use of diesel exhaust fluid hurting bees and pollinators like that. But honestly, guys, I couldn't find anything. The only thing I could find is that NOx, which is a byproduct of diesel combustion, can cause honeybees to lose their sense of smell, so to speak, and could affect them in that way. but that has nothing to do with DEF itself. That's actually to do with not using DEF where it's required. But if anybody out there has got a link to some factual information that supports the argument that diesel exhaust fluid hurts bees and other pollinators, please share that in the comments and let me know. What else? Somebody had asked a question about their truck and turbo surging. So that brought me to a discussion on turbos and issues with turbos on the 6.7 Cummins truck. So all 6.7 liter Cummins trucks use a electronically controlled variable geometry turbocharger, VGT for short. And the VGT is quite a remarkable piece of equipment. A lot of people give it a bad rap, but a variable geometry turbo has the ability to spool up very quickly, and it also has the ability to give your truck that also wonderful exhaust brake function that helps you slow down whether you're loaded or even unloaded. It helps tremendously. And the VGT has the ability, going back to the quick spool up, you don't have to tune the engine to create heat to spool up a variable geometry turbocharger. You simply can control the exhaust flow through the turbine housing and use that as a means to spool up the turbo quickly and get it into boost quickly. And they spool up lightning fast. And by spooling up lightning fast, you can get the fuel in the engine quicker, burn it cleaner, and get a much better throttle response versus, a fixed geometry, old style turbocharger. So the bad rap with the VGTs is the electronic part. The actuator can fail, and when it does, it is expensive to replace. You can get away with just replacing an actuator. There's some offerings out there. You can buy one that's made by City Diesel. You can buy one that's put out by BD Diesel. There's Cummins replacements. The prices are all over the place. You can spend $600-800 on a new actuator, and you can spend over $1,000. You can spend up close to $2,000 on an actual genuine wholesale actuator if you want. So, but generally that's what fails. So quite oftentimes when that fails, you can just simply replace an actuator versus the whole turbo. The whole turbo itself is $2,000 on up. A modified VGT, a performance VGT, which there's some nice ones on the market now. Some of them can be over $3,000, but they're good to have. And if you were to ask me, should I swap out my VGT when it fails for old style fixed geometry turbo, and obviously the truck has to be deleted in order to do that, is that a good idea? Honestly, guys, unless you want the sound, particularly doing like a second gen manifold swap that a fixed geometry turbo offers, unless you want that sound, I would go back with another VGT simply because it keeps your exhaust brake function and it spools up lightning quick, and you can have a nice clean tune with a variable geometry turbo that's not as easy to have with a fixed single. Now, if you go with a compound setup with fixed turbos, obviously you can get a very fast spool up and get around some things without having to utilize the VGT. But I would, if you had to replace your VGT at some point in time in your truck's lifetime, my opinion, I would replace it with another VGT, simply because it just offers so much performance in the exhaust brake function. Was there anything else that really come to mind here? So somebody had mentioned that based upon what the EPA lawyer had told me about a week ago, basically the person said, you know, I should read between the lines. They're not enforcing anything. Well, there again, let me bring back a video prior to that in which I talked to an attorney that does cases between the EPA and diesel shops. They're still prosecuting people. They're still busting shops, at least right now. Is that going to change? I sure hope so, but you know, it's not here yet. There again, let me conclude this video and just tell you guys, if you want to see things change when it comes to government regulation and diesel emissions, please, there again, contact your elected officials and make a case as to why you want things changed when it comes to emissions regulations, and make a good case for it. You know, explain the cost of maintaining these emission systems, explain the cost of downtime, explain the reduced reliability and the longevity of a very expensive investment. Make that case. And if enough of you guys keep making that case, then maybe something will be pushed through, you know, while there is a majority in the Congress and the executive branch that would be willing to make a change or support a change. Because, guys, if the Democrats get control of the executive branch or the legislative branch again, and God forbid, the judicial branch again, then you could just hang it up. It's never coming back, and if anything, it'll get way worse. So keep that in mind, guys. Keep pressuring your elected officials if you want to see things change. I'm hopeful that things will change, and you know, I'm not giving up. I don't think it's going to come overnight, but I think that we could see some things happen in the future that would lessen the burden on us and allow shops like mine to possibly, in certain circumstances, offer delete tuning again. So keep it up, guys. Anyways, guys, I think that's about all I'm going to talk about today. It's been a long week. You know, it's a lot of things going on. I'm still here, still trying to make a living, but I enjoy doing this. And please make your comments. Feel free to send me an email with your comments and suggestion. Ray@rrdiesel.com, or you can comment in the video comment section. As always, guys, keep in mind what I said in the middle of the video. I can do retunes for transmission tuning. If you're a prior customer of mine, whatever I've done for you in the past, that doesn't matter. If it's just changing your transmission tune, I can do it now. I feel comfortable doing it, so hit me up for that, please. As always, guys, thank you for your support. God bless each and every one of you, and we will see you again very soon.